Welcome, friends, to this first episode of Charted Waters, Discovering the Pacific Northwest Through Story. I'm Maureen Gordon. For the next few minutes with us, you'll uncover wonders, hidden stories, and life truths from the rich world of North America's Pacific Northwest coast. This podcast is for people curious about nature and its connections with culture, or who love the ocean wash rainforest itself. Like Travel for the Mind, we aim to enhance your life with new understanding. Thanks for joining us. We're starting this series off with something that might be top of mind for a lot of people right now, the connection between mental well-being and travel. While today's theme is only loosely connected to the Pacific Northwest, this region is a powerful healer of the spirit, and that alone makes a lot of us here curious about the connections between mental health and travel, whether it's travel up the road and into the rainforest or whether it's across a continent. As a guide and as an owner of an expedition cruise company, I've witnessed in hundreds of different ways the impact of travel on people's mental health. I'm joined today by two amazing people with great insights on this topic, travel psychologist Javier Labourt and photographer and Canadian Geographic Nikon ambassador Jenny Wong. Welcome, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Maureen. Hi, everyone in the audience. A pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Through the insights of them today, you're going to learn how to get the main benefits to your mental health from travel and also explore a little bit about what that means, whether it's developing yourself within while exploring the world or pushing gently beyond your boundaries through new experiences, or mindfulness, which some theorize may even slow the aging process. So stay tuned for that as we get into it. I'm excited to dive in and for you to meet our first guest, Jenny Wong. She's a photographer descended from many generations of refugees, so perhaps travel is in her DNA. She's backpacked or otherwise explored all the continents except Australia. Perhaps that's in the works, I don't know, and specializes in adventure, wildlife, travel, and commercial photography. She particularly cares about using photography to spread awareness from the front lines of climate change, like the Arctic. We're really lucky to also have her this year as our photography guide on a photo expedition in the Great Bear Rainforest that my company, Maple Leaf Adventures, is operating this fall here in the Pacific Northwest. Welcome, Jenny.
Hello, so happy to be here and so excited for the Great Bear Rainforest trip.
Awesome. Let's go back a little bit in time, Jenny, and start with a story. We've had some conversations before, and I'm interested for you to share a moment in your life when you felt changed for the good by a travel experience and some kind of good that you've carried with you since. Can you describe the moment that it happened for us?
I have to go back to my trip to the Arctic, my very first trip. It was an invite by some friends that I have never met in person to do a 400-kilometer commute from Clyde River to Kwan Inlet by a snowmobile.
Wow.
And, the guy's like, are you going to be tough enough for this? Like, it's going to be nothing that you've ever done before. I had no idea, I just said yes. And out of pure curiosity, I just was like, and will to want to see this place, I said yes. And it changed me. It changed my perspective of who I am, who I want to be as a photographer. It was the moment where I became an activist for climate. I wanted to see it. I didn't realize how much purpose I found in wanting to be part of that conversation. And it really just took getting to meet the people there and how I wanted to tell those stories came through that is meeting those people, following in their footsteps, literally having to follow them through every one of their footsteps to not break through the ice, and having my foot break through the ice when I didn't, and feeling that vulnerability.
That's really powerful to have become an activist through a trip. And I think I have a connection to that myself. But can you take us I wanna go back a little bit. You were mentioning something about following in people's footsteps and your foot going through the ice. Can you set the scene a little bit? How did you arrive? What did you see, and how did that experience unfold?
Well, you fly into, like, these really remote towns, and this town that I flew into with Clyde River. My s Right away, my snowmobile was broken down, had to wait for them to come get me, instead of meeting up with them, and we started our commute, and we're on sea ice, so, we rely on Inuit guides to help us navigate the ice. I had no experience, had no idea how, and this is May in the spring when the ice is starting to break up. So there's melt pools, there's bad ice, rough ice. We're navigating through that. They have no idea. Every year it's different. Even to go to the washroom for a female, and this is a team of guys, like having to, it's like, turn around. I have to find a spot to pee, and those are the only times where I'm literally not following in their footsteps. Wherever they step, I know it's going to be safe to step. I'm not going to go through. And it was literally this one time where I had to go and find a place to pee behind some ice that my foot went through, and that vulnerability of having that scare of going through the ice, and understanding how these people have to live. I was only there for 2 weeks, and that intersection of local communities and the land that they live on, was super powerful for me.
And what was that moment? When your foot went through the ice, what was going on inside you?
I was just wanting to go pee, you know? But I think when you're scrambling, like, you feel that vulnerability of nature, and that, we are all at that whim. And I don't think that we feel that in our very coddled concrete playground that many of us live in.
Mhm.
Everything's built in a very convenient way. We're warm, we're sheltered, we're safe. And in nature, there is beauty and there is adversity that you have to work through. And I think that moment was like something that I have never experienced. It was one of the greatest, I think, in my life, for a first experience. Some of the hardest adversity I've had to go through for culture, like understanding the culture there, understanding the ice, understanding what I was doing. Um, yeah, it it was a challenge. Like, now my boot is wet. Now what am I going to do for the next week of camping? Week and a half of camping? Like, I have to dry it out. I'm literally sitting in my tent with a boot. Yeah, and it's freezing. So the water's freezing my boot. So having to deal with all those things make you realize, like, um, what I'm capable of, I think. And yeah, I am actually tough enough, and it built more confidence in taking on these challenges, I think, in life.
Yeah. Yeah, and somehow, I would say on our trips, it's not life and death like, stepping through the ice outside of Pond Inlet, but, there is that stepping outside your comfort zone, whether it's wa going out in the rain and not running back inside because you wanna see the bears catching the salmon, or whether it's, stepping on a boat and you're not sure how that's gonna be, and then realizing the community and your connection to it all, and somehow feeling small in the immensity of the place actually brings a lot of peace.
Yeah, I think, like, that, like, our ability to feel vulnerable, and I think in that vulnerability, you connect with a place. You open up more. You have to open up. You have to accept where you are. You have to learn to adapt, which I think that we don't get that chance to learn to adapt to very much in our daily life anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and curiosity and the all the possibilities in life, I think they open up a little bit more.
yeah.
Thank you. I wanna turn to Javier now and talk a little bit about the psychology of what's happening here for Jenny or for me or for our guests. Um, He's a psychologist who also loves exploring the world. And through these two passions, Javi's created a practice that combines both, helping people improve and expand their well being, and as Oprah might say, living their best lives by using travel as the method for personal growth. There's so much to talk about here. But first, Javi, back to Jenny's moment there and the moments she was describing. What's happening inside her from a well being or a psychology perspective?
So thanks, Maureen. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit because what was Jenny mentioning, it resonated with what I really think, and I deeply advocate for a way of like a perspective of traveling. And she mentioned many interesting words that are really deep concepts. I mean, both of you mentioned this. Uh, the fact that when we travel, we are open towards our vulnerability. This is really important, and this makes us like feel a better connection, a greater connection with our emotions. She also mentioned adversity and challenges, and stepping and kind of resolving these adversities or these challenges helps us with our self esteem. So we are talking about our self esteem, we are talking about our emotions. Uh, then she talked about being capable, like this also is about our self esteem. And also she mentioned the nature being overwhelming, and this could relate also to mindful traveling. In a way, I think that this all of these concepts, what they have in common is that travel brings the perfect scenario to promote a personal change, and this is kind of the key question of the matter. And what I think as a concept is that in the past 15 to 20 years, all the travel industry has developed in a way that is very easy to travel for many people. And we're kind of losing the reality that, that travel is a passage towards our vulnerability. So we have this, you understand?
I'm so glad you said that.
Uh,
Keep going.
because I think this is the key concept. It's so easy to travel with the internet, with the low cost airlines, and etc., that we are losing this way of connection while we are traveling. And I think that the whole idea of the podcast and the whole idea of many people in the travel industry and travelers are going back to this. Travel is an opportunity to promote personal change because we are in touch with our vulnerability, because we will get in touch with new cultures, because we will get our brains really outside of our comfort zones. We will work with our resilience. We will get in touch with new communities and understand new perspectives about the world. But this, like, we need an emotional preparation for this. We understand this. Do we agree? Like, if we just take the plane and go to the trip, we are losing an opportunity. And I think that what Jenny brought us with the story and what all this podcast is about this. We need to go back and understand that travel is an opportunity for personal change. I think, this is the key issue, and I think we are all into this way of traveling, mindful traveling.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And there's so many things that you said there that I love and connect with, and I want to dive a little bit deeper into a few of them. But before we do that, you are creating a documentary, a beautiful documentary in which you help regular people overcome barriers to their self-actualization or their goals or their happiness through travel. Um, why did you decide to start that?
Basically, the documentary comes. I think I have to explain a little bit about my life because my life got me into places that are kind of unexpected. So my studies are psychological studies. I got my degree here in Argentina. Then I did a master's in the U.S. in Palo Alto. And then I started in my private office. I started practicing. In the meantime, I did a lot of traveling with my family, exotic destinations, backpacking, Asia, South America, Africa, etc. At some point, and really by a random chance, I started working for a Greek travel show, a travel show for Greek television, and this was kind of like a new, I would say, a new version of myself, and I started seeing kind of like the power of TV and visual, I would say, content to transform and impact. And a few years ago, I had this idea of turning into a documentary and probably, hopefully, a documentary series about making people that never traveled before, or maybe they traveled to familiar places, taking these people into unfamiliar territories, into exotic destinations, and actually bring the psychological part into this, and acknowledging that every experience we do takes a step into a personal transformation. As a therapist, I use this platform. So every adventure we did had I would say, a goal of personal change. So I started building trips specially tailored for these people, and I started filming these trips. And the idea evolved into a documentary. I have a partner that is a documentary filmmaker, and we are doing this, trying to sell it to platforms, trying to sell it to screens in order to, I would say, it's all about changing lives by using the power of travel and psychology.
Yeah, thank you. I watched the trailer that you have on your website, and in it there's a young woman called Amalia,
Yeah.
who is a wonderful musician, but she has stage fright. Can you tell us how Amalia's trip developed for her? What happened on that?
So when Amalia, I met Amalia at the time she was 22 years old. This happened a few years ago, and she was a really talented musician. She composed her songs. She played the guitar very well. She had like a super sensitive voice, uh, but she was kind of blocked in the way that she had anxiety towards performing on stage. It was not like a clinical anxiety, but it was related to a strong lack of confidence. All
Mhm.
of her friends were telling her, like, Amalia, you should play live, you should play on stage. Uh, you have a lot of talents. We want to see you. And she was kind of like, I would say, avoiding this, you know. And
Yeah,
for someone that wants to do a musical career, it's a key and essential that she had to play on stage. So
yeah,
at that time, I had the idea of this documentary of taking someone that could really take advantage of a life changing trip. So I got in touch. Amalia is the sister of a good friend of mine, so I got in touch with her. I started talking to her. We did some interviews before the trip, and I started building this trip where we went to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and then we went to Bali, to Indonesia. So basically, we spent there 9 days. Every day was full of experiences, and in the last day, I organized like a session of her playing live in front of 30, 35 other tourists that were eating in a restaurant. So she had to go on stage and she performed. She was a little bit nervous. She was a little bit like anxious, but she was prepared for this moment because we worked on her self confidence. We worked on relaxation techniques, all related to travel experiences. While we were traveling, she was working into this. So we did a little bit of psychological theory, a lot of experiences, and a lot of knowledge for her to learn. And then she started performing better. And what I like the most about the story is that for her it was the first trip outside the American or the South American continent. And 4 months after she came back from Indonesia, I received a message on my WhatsApp, and it was Amalia. And she tells me, Javi, I need to tell you that I just bought a ticket to fly to Costa Rica, and I'm going to spend there 1 month, and I'm going to live by playing in bar. And she did this. So, so, this,
fantastic.
so it's like I keep this message as one of my most like beautiful memories, but it really worked, and I think it portrays the power of travel.
Absolutely. It can be transformative. And I like what you were saying before, where you said there's so much these days that makes travel so easy. We don't spend the time preparing mentally or emotionally for a real trip. Maybe, and I'm as guilty of it as the next person. I think I want to fly somewhere beautiful and have a massage, right? That's not necessarily, I mean, maybe that's just a break and that's a different kind of travel. Um, but I think that other kinds of travel, when you're out exploring the world, they can change your life. I mean, certainly it's changed mine. I left everything behind that I had been working on in a totally different industry and a house that I owned to come and work at Maple Leaf Adventures because I was so impacted by the place, the wildlife, the people, and doing something good for the planet and for people. So it really can totally change your life if you're in a place where that's what you're looking for, or you're open to it. Maybe you're not looking for it. I wanted to switch to another thing that you mentioned, Javi, and that is the idea of mindfulness. We talk a lot about mindfulness these days, and I think my stereotype, and maybe that of a lot of people, is for mindfulness, you sit in a quiet place, cross your legs, close your eyes, and focus on your breathing. Um, but there are other kinds of mindfulness, and I love that travel provides mindfulness. And Jenny, I wanted to come back to you because as a photographer, I think you have a special relationship with that kind of mindfulness, mindfulness with open eyes. Can you talk to us a little bit about how photography and mindfulness have something in common?
I think when you're there, like when I'm planning a shoot, um, I have these misconceptions about like, or not misconceptions. I'm planning a shoot. I plan it a year out, a couple of months out. I want to succeed in what I do, but I think when I get there, it's always going to be different. It's always going to I have all these expectations of what I would like to shoot, and when you get there, things change. Things get thrown out of the window. But you adapt and and I think in that adversity, in that moment of not getting that, not seeing that bear yet and anticipating it, you break out of that, you start seeing the other things that are around you and having to create. And sometimes that's the B-roll leading up to the big bear. And I think that's the wonderful part about it, is that I always go back to those images. They might not be the cover image, and they might not even be anything that will see the day of light. But those images might be just for me to remind me of what it was like to be there. And I think that's really important for my style of photography or for what I do.
Can
Um,
you can you draw us a picture or take a photograph? What kind of images? So you might have gone to the Arctic to photograph the polar bear in its waning habitat, but what are the other images, the ones where you're waiting for the bear to appear and you're suddenly noticing what's around you? What are you photographing?
it could be anything, but for me, I totally remember this one time where I was traveling on the sea ice for about, I don't know, like it had to be a week, and we haven't seen a polar bear yet. And we were camping. It's been hard, and it's getting worrisome that we were there to do a shoot, and the polar bear definitely is a big part of it. And we came upon these prints, and it's one of my favorite images. It's like these prints now going up to a breathing hole, and it's not a common shot that people get of polar bears. You see a lot of polar bear shots, but having a print and a successful kill site next to it, in another, maybe a few steps from it, was just a really cool story. And it was something that you don't expect, but you have to appreciate it. Like I could have, without being mindful, without being in the moment, and stopping, we would have just blown right past those footprints, wanting to look for that bigger image and that
Mhm.
chasing that expectation, I guess, and not allowing the environment to kind of shape and inspire you.
Yeah.
We stopped, and I think those are the moments where those little B-roll images is what brings the whole story together for me.
Yeah, I've noticed that being in a new place brings me away from my problems, even if I'm just doing something like someone's driving me somewhere or, especially if I'm riding on a bike. Um, my head is so much in the present moment because there's so much to notice, the way houses are different or the color of the sunlight or the way the trees grow or the style of leaves. I never realized how much that is a kind of mindfulness. I know that when we did another trip together that was a photo trip, you were giving some advice about this kind of photography. And can you just share with our listeners, what's your advice about photographing the small moments that make the big picture?
I always say that there's images that you take as a photographer for yourself, and there's images that you take for the world. And those little images that you take for yourself, you never know where they lead you. Some of them actually do make magazines. But at the end of the day, they help you go back to the place more than those big images do. Yeah, you remember that bear or that narwhal or the eagle, but those little moments of the droplets of water on your jacket or the uneven horizon in rough waters. Uh, I think those are the moments that when I'm home, they bring me back there to remember so vividly, like the story that I want to tell, those emotions that I felt.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
regardless of taking those images for a magazine or for a client, I think it's really important for me to take those images even for myself
Yeah.
for the process of completing a project. Because I need
Yeah.
that emotional connection to create something that is impactful for the viewers that are going to see my images. I think if there's no emotions going into it for myself, I can't expect my audience to feel anything when they see it either.
Yeah. Yeah. And even curiosity is an emotion, which is
Yeah.
Javier, coming back to you, when you're traveling, it almost seems the antithesis of being able to be mindful at first because there's so much going on. Can you give advice to our listeners about how to be mindful, practice mindfulness when traveling?
So, I mean, what you guys were talking right now was interesting because at some point you mentioned the brain activity that we are having while we are traveling, and I think that this is crucial because when we are in a new unexplored spot, our brains will be working, will be kind of stressed. Okay, this is kind of unfamiliar, so they will be internalizing new shapes, new smells, new sights. Our senses will be working, and it's a little bit contradictory towards being mindful and relaxed. But it's really possible to be relaxed and mindful on those times. So my main advice, realizing that being and practicing mindfulness is staying in the present moment, being aware of your breath, like kind of witnessing your thoughts and let them pass by like the clouds cross the sky. But for me, the best advice for me being mindful while traveling is to let yourself go. Understanding that the control that we have or we pretend to have is just an illusion. So, to do a practical, I would say, practical exercise while traveling and to practice mindfulness while traveling, I always recommend just getting lost in a place. Of course, taking the security measures that we need to take. If we are like in wilderness, I think we should take a compass or a GPS just to be able to get back, and not put ourselves into risk. Or if we are walking a city that we don't know, just explore safe neighborhoods. But the fact of getting lost and just pulling away the goal of the experience. The goal is to get lost. Just go
Mhm.
there and see how you feel. Like kind of feel how you feel. And this is a really interesting way of being mindful. Of course, if we practice meditation in a forest and we focus on our breath, we put our back straight straight and stuff, we will also be practicing mindfulness. But this is a kind of concrete exercise that we can do when we arrive to a new city, to a new forest, a new jungle, or whatever. We get lost. And the goal, I think that we were talking a while ago with Jenny about Latin American society and the American or North American Canadian society. uh, we are used to put a lot of goals in what we do. Like we are having dinner in order to get us to share a good time, or we are getting to meet in order to close a business or whatever.
Hmm.
Traveling gives us the opportunity to just get lost to experience, and experience is focused on our senses. So if we focus on our senses, we will be doing mindfulness, and it's very easy. It's just getting our minds go, just don't focus in the thoughts, focus on the senses. And this is kind of like a mindful and interesting and super powerful. Some people can connect on those moments with taking photos. It's like with a cell phone or with a camera, but we just go there and we are very aware of our sights. We are very aware of the smells. We put the attention on the eyes. We put the attention on the nose. And this is a way of mindful traveling.
Amazing. That's amazing. And I have to ask because I've seen headlines recently, and I think other people may have, that there's a suggestion or a theory that travel and perhaps mindfulness in travel could slow the aging process. Can you tell us how we might understand those headlines, Javi?
Yeah, so basically, I think the paper that was out in 2024, it's a paper that a group of researchers in a university in Australia called Edith Cowan University, they what they did is they proposed a really interesting framework for traveling that could, in my opinion, open an extremely interesting door towards. They mention the aging process, but it's interesting because what they are doing is they propose this theoretical basis, and they say like, okay, this basis gives us the possibility to study the real results that traveling might have, like the effects traveling might have on people. Their hypothesis is that travel might slow the aging process because what they use is the entropy perspective. The entropy perspective comes from the physics, and they say that the human body, the organs, the tissues, they start in a low entropy state, and this is when we are born, and when we are in our elderly ages, it's a high entropy state.
Hmm.
Our body tends to a disorder because higher entropy is higher chaos, higher disorganization. And what they say is that the amount of positive experiences that we can live while we travel, the kind of present time, mindfulness, consciousness that we experience while traveling, they say that this might help slow the age process, not stop, but slow, because the entropy will be slower. So what they say, which is super interesting, is that they they encourage other researchers to start putting an interest into travel research and understanding the human, I would say, body references towards heart rate, cortisol levels, stress reduction, etc., before they travel and after they travel, giving the platform to really believe what I think we all believe, that travel is so good for the mind, for the health, and for the soul. And this is the research platform to start studying this.
Wow. And so if I went on a trip, I'm 54 years old. So I'm entering that, well, I'm well along in that entropy state, let's say. And so if I go away and I explore a new place, I'm going to come back and my cortisol levels might have been reduced through the relaxation and the sense of peace. My brain activity may have been increased. My connections in my brain through mindfulness may have been increased, or from meeting other people, and that's going to slow down the entropy process in my body. Is that have I got that right?
Yeah, this is what they say, but what they also mention, which is very interesting, is that that's the case if you are experiencing positive experiences. If you're experiencing negative experiences, this could also have like kind of harmful consequences in a way. So what we understand as actual critics or readers of the research article is that the whole travel state or the whole mindset while we're traveling, it's a kind of like a positive platform or a negative platform. It could
Right.
accelerate the aging process and make you super stressed if you are overwhelmed by the negative experiences, or it can really empower you and potent and really give you like a different way of living or a new life perspective if you do the right experiences. And this is what they say is like the more we consider travel as therapy, the better will impact us in our well-being.
Amazing. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the results of that research, and perhaps there's a whole nother episode or storyline about ensuring to the best of your ability how to choose a travel that's going to be a travel option that's going to be good for you and not a super negative experience. Before I wrap up and talking about negative experiences though, I think it's only responsible of us to talk about, travel. We do travel for ourselves. We do travel for curiosity and stimulation, for relaxation, or just to get a change, or because we have to go visit people and so forth. But I think as travelers, we know we carry a responsibility. And so I wanted to get from both of you your tips for mindful or intentional travel and how to be good to the planet when doing it. Um, Jenny, I'll start with you.
All right. So this is something that's always front of mind for me. And so I think one of the first things that you can do is do your research on who you're traveling with and how you're traveling, and support businesses that support local tourism and hire locals, buy local, and what their footprint is and what their initiatives are in the areas that you're traveling in. That's the easiest first thing that you can do. And then I'd say when you're there, there's like so much that you can do in terms of learning for yourself. So for me, like I'm always curious about local culture, local voices, and particularly in the Great Bear Rainforest, where there's a long history of conservation, local conservation efforts. I think open your eyes and heart, brain, listen to people's stories. And some of these communities are not connected by roads. Most of these communities are not connected by roads. They're very remote. Help give those voices, bring those stories home. And I do a lot of social media. I do, a lot of advocacy. But the most impact that anybody can have is having conversations at the dinner table with your friends. What you have at the dinner table will have more impact on those people than me talking on Instagram and social media. Um, Sharing those stories of conservation, I think is it brings purpose to you to join those communities, but it also helps these communities get these stories out,
Yeah.
stories that they need to be told, I think.
Thank you. That's beautiful and important. Javi, what about you?
So I think that the whole concept of the travel mindset, there is a deep psychological and I would say human concept that really we all can feel identified, and I think we don't pay attention enough, and it's empathy. And I think that to make a more sustainable world, we should work on our empathy and being empathetic. We should be, of course, we should be kind, but we should really understand the person that we have in front of us. And this needs to come with a deep respect for the culture without feeling as kind of like superior because we might be more educated in universities and stuff, but understand that simplicity is also very deep and that empathy means understanding why the locals are taking the decisions they are taking in their actual context. And this demands a lot of personal and internal work. It's about self knowledge and it's about cultural knowledge. So I think that the more we work on ourselves before we travel, I think Jenny did this mention. I think it's really, really essential about understanding our moment in life, what who we are right now, and what are we searching for in this trip, and how this connects with the culture that we are going to visit helps us kind of like bring us these humanities together. I think empathy is is the key for a better world for sure because we will understand the struggles, the problems, how to help them, and also how to understand them because sometimes the decisions of the locals are kind of not the way we are going to do things or we would think that we will do things, but it's the best way that they are doing and they have a context. So I think that empathy is the real solution for mindful and sustainable travel.
Thank you. I I love that. I think that's empathy. And because empathy can be towards other humans, it can be towards animals of other species, it can be towards a place itself.
Maureen, sorry to interrupt, but I think that also uh, I forgot to mention the empathy is also about compassion. You know, the more we are empathetic, the more compassionate about the world, about people, and also about ourselves. We are better persons. So if we get affected while we travel, we are affected by the humanity that we have in front of us, the animal that we have in front of us. We'll be more compassionate when we are back home. So I think this is kind of like the key for a more sustainable. It's about connection and compassion.
I agree 100%. And I mean, I think we could probably all talk for a few more hours here, but we do we do have to wrap up. So I wanted to sort of reflect back a little bit here in closing and think, next time we're all approaching our trip, what I've learned is, think about what the intention of the trip is, but also practice mindfulness. And if, the intention that you've gone with, e.g., Jenny, photographing a polar bear right away, isn't the one that's presented, that there is so much else we can find in the moment, and that we need to treat ourselves kindly and the world around us kindly. And that experience may even help us feel younger for longer. So I
That's
want to thank
wonderful.
you guys both for coming. And before we finally wrap up, I want to let people know how to learn more about what you guys have spoken about. So, Javi, what's the best way for people to learn more about you and your work?
So basically, I think my website or my Instagram would be the best. My website is more specific about psychology. My website, you can find me on travelpsychologist.com or javilabourt.com is the same. It's just a redirection. Also, my Instagram is at Javi Labourt, which is Labourt. Javi is the short for Javier. So both ways are a good way to reach me. I also have a TEDx talk that is called Becoming a Travel Psychologist. I have some talks online where I discuss this, like the psychological power of traveling.
Thank you. Jenny, what about you? What's the best way for people to learn about your work and your passions?
I'm super active on Instagram, so find me on Instagram. Connect with me, DM me. My handle is JWCaptures, and that's JVUBCAPTURES. So I'm always welcome to questions. DM me.
Great. And we'll link those both in the show notes as well, along with a few other resources we've discussed that might be of interest. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't take this moment to mention that we'll be hosting a Great Bear Rainforest photography expedition cruise this fall with Canadian Geographic, and Jenny Wong is going to be our photography guide on that. It's September 6th to 13th, 2025. It's on our little tiny expedition ship Cascadia that we've lovingly restored here on the coast of British Columbia. And it's, I think it's a 7-night, 8-day expedition into the fjords and river valleys, beaches, and channels of one of the planet's most intact wilderness places. And I say wilderness in the more modern sense of intact natural systems, because it is a place that people have lived in for so many millennia that nobody knows. And Jenny is going to guide us towards photography of big animals like whales and bears, but also those special small moments we discussed as well.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you.
so excited for it.
Oh, yeah, we're excited too. So friends, thank you for coming and traveling along with us today. I wish you all a day that stimulates your curiosity, fills you with purpose, and hopefully some peace as well. And stay tuned for our next podcast.